probably agree on.
Yeah, the playoff team for sure.
So do you.
I mean, I tell you what, I don't think there was a more accurate state. And
if they struggle again, I mean, I don't think there's any way you can keep Alex Critch, but.
What's going on, y'all? I'm Bud Elliott, and this is my college football summer school series on the Cover 3 podcast. Today, I'm talking Penn State. No better place to go than Lions 247 for that. And my man, Daniel Gallen, who joins us once again. What's going on, dude?
Thanks for having me, Bud. I've been looking forward to this just like I have the past couple summers.
As has our audience. When is Penn State coming out there asking me? I'm like, well, I'm recording it today. The release date is TBD, but if you're listening to it, it means the release date is today. So
it's a good way to put it.
Look at that. So some things the same, but some things distinctly different this year for Penn State. New coordinators on both sides of the ball. Dealer's choice. Start wherever you want, but how will this look different for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, I'd start on the defensive side of the ball because I think you can go through that a little bit quicker. Penn State returns a ton of talent on that side of the ball, even when you consider that they had two of their top three cornerbacks from last year drafted, their top two edge rushers drafted, including a first rounder. There's still a ton of talent there. And bringing in Tom Allen to replace Manny Diaz, things are going to look a little bit different because of that. And Manny Diaz did such a good job last year. But I think in bringing in Tom Allen, it's someone who still runs a 4-3. So you're keeping the framework pretty similar. He's going to put his own little twist on things. We've already had that this spring with the introduction of the Lion position, which is a bit of a hybrid nickel safety linebacker that will look a little bit different. But at the same time, Tom Allen has never had this kind of depth to work with, never had this kind of talent when he was the head coach at Indiana. And he is rejuvenated, excited to get back to just being a defensive coordinator. So, last year's defense was historically great. I think in total yards, it was the fewest given up in a season since 2011 Alabama. It's going to be hard to replicate that given how college football is today. But I really like that side of the ball still. And then on offense, Andy Kotelnicki coming in from Kansas. Huge splash, a lot of excitement from Penn State. Talking to the defensive players this year, I think that's kind of the, all the offensive players we talked to this spring were, good feedback. Drew Aller's excited. They feel like this offense can unlock them. But when you talk to the defenders, they're saying that it's way more explosive. They're seeing things done that Penn State was not doing these past couple of years. They really feel like that the dynamic talent on that Penn State offense that maybe hasn't shown itself is going to get its shot. So there's a ton of excitement with Andy Kotelnicki. This is the type of hire that, can elevate you, I think, from where Penn State has been into that college football playoff tier. So I'm excited to see what it looks like in practice. Spring game was super vanilla as expected. But with what Penn State has, there's a lot of guys that I think can thrive in this. And I think that they're really well positioned to take a step forward.
The stuff they ran last 2 years at Kansas is really similar to me to what Chadwell ran at Coastal, which they played Coastal the year before they started running some of this stuff, certainly. So, I think it's really creative how they just scheme guys just wide the hell open, and there's just nobody else around the screen. So I don't blame them at all for not showcasing that in the spring game. If you're a college fantasy football player, though, with the comment like unlock some of the the talent of Penn State, I think they're like, wait, where is the they're looking. So lay it on me. Who is going to get unlocked most likely in this offense?
So I think to go with the headliners, I think that you want to see more explosive plays through the air out of Drew Aller. And I think that the goal will be to scheme guys open so that you can make those downfield passes, that you can, get those big plays. We'll see what this looks like. Like Drew Aller, the big calling card last year that James Franklin really leaned on was that he never turned the ball over. He finished the year 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, which on paper looks really good. But then when you were watching the games, especially Ohio State and Michigan, was really hard to watch at various times. So maybe there will be more opportunities to take risks. Maybe there will be more guys open so that you can actually take those downfield shots. So I think you look at Aller first. Nick Singleton was really quiet for the first part of last year After they fired Mike Yurcich in November, Singleton closed the year really, really strong. I think that he is the type of player that Kotelnicki will really scheme to his strengths, give him opportunities to make plays. And then the last guy that I'm really excited to see that's a little bit more under the radar, Caden Saunders. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore wide receiver, top 100 recruit in the class of 2022 out of Ohio. He was Penn State's first commit in summer 2020. Depths of COVID, decided he was going to go to Penn State. His freshman year, he redshirted. Former wide receivers coach Taylor Stubblefield was very blunt that Saunders was out of shape and that he had a lot of work to do. Last offseason, he put that work in. We started to see it a little bit on the field under new wide receivers coach Marcus Hagans last year. And coming out of spring, there was a lot of really good buzz about Saunders, both from Saunders himself. And he's been really honest with us the whole time he was here. Like, I remember talking to him last year because Taylor Stubblefield, the quote he said was that Caden Saunders spent too much time at the creamery, which Penn State fans know what that is. The ice cream's really good there. And we asked Caden Saunders about that. And I kind of approached it delicately. And he was just like, yeah, I was out of shape. I wasn't ready for this. So he seems to be someone that I think could really unlock things as a slot guy, gadget guy, has those athletic skills. He can make some things happen.
I'm excited to watch it. I mean, just the job they did at Kansas. Penn State plays a higher caliber of competition, but yet the athlete at Penn State is also, I think, a good bit better at most spots than what Kansas has. They did lose a couple offensive linemen to graduation or to the draft. Are they good there?
It's going to be interesting. Tyler Donahue, my colleague, and I were talking, and the way that we've kind of framed it is that, it's kind of when you open the puzzle and you have all the pieces, and then you just got to put the puzzle together correctly. And I think that Penn State has a really interesting mix of guys who've played a lot of football. They've really rotated over these past couple of years to get guys seasoning. Like last year, Drew Shelton, even though he started in the Rose Bowl when Olu Fashanu was hurt, but with Olu Fashanu back last year, he was competing with Caden Wallace at right tackle. Caden Wallace, who just raised the level of his game more than we ever thought he could. He took that over, but Penn State still got Drew Shelton reps on both sides late in games. They had a lot of blowouts last year, so they got these guys in, got them playing time. But you added Nolan Rucci through the transfer portal. We'll see what side he plays on. Sal Wormley came back for a sixth year at right guard. And you just have like Vanga Ioane is in year 3. JV Nelson, JUCO guy, is in year 3. He can play left tackle, left guard. You have Javen Williams, who was a 5-star last year. He redshirted last year. He's in the mix at left tackle. And then the one guy that not a lot of people outside of Penn State might know about, who I think can really change how this looks, is Anthony Donka. He was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2023. He was the lowest rated of Penn State's 4 offensive line signees. He was on the interior all last year, and then suddenly they get to the Peach Bowl. Caden Wallace exits at halftime. That was kind of the deal, getting him to play and not opt out. Anthony Donka comes in and plays right tackle. We've never seen him do that. And he more than held his own. He's been at right tackle all this year. And so if he can, he's going to be a redshirt freshman. We've heard some comparisons to Olu Fashanu from, kind of half jokingly from people in the program, but that stuff can be rooted in truth sometimes. If he can come in and seize that right tackle job, then you kind of have the ripple effect down of, guys moving, flipping sides, competing at different spots. So I think that he's like, if that position settles out there, that's going to be really interesting to see. And the last guy I'll mention is Nick Dawkins, 5th-year senior. I think he's in a good position to be the center next year. But that offensive line, it's like, I feel good about it, but we're going to have to see in Morgantown, August 31st, how it actually fits together.
It seems like the concern is more the speed with which they gel, and maybe the ceiling than the floor. Like, they got enough bodies who belong at Penn State, which
yes,
is, encouraging. All right, so let's fast forward 6-7 weeks from now. We're in Indianapolis for the Big Ten Media Days. I think that's right, or Chicago, one of the two.
Indeed.
Okay, cool. They all kind of blend together at this point for me. Who's a guy who will probably not be voted onto the preseason All Big Ten team that you think will be a miss by the media and will probably make it come the postseason?
That's a really good one. I think maybe KJ Winston at safety. He has gotten some buzz this offseason. I've seen him at the top of some PFF graphics. I've seen some really good feedback on his grading. But I think that he has the potential to be a really, really big breakout player last year. You go back 2 years ago in 2022, Penn State really ran with a four-man rotation at safety. Jair Brown obviously played the most, but then you had Keaton Ellis, Jalen Reed, a little bit of KJ Winston there, probably someone else I'm blanking on right now because it was 2 years ago. And then last year it was Zachy Wheatley. And then you go into last year and it looked like it would be Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, Keaton Ellis, Zachy Wheatley fighting for playing time again or rotating through. But for most of the year, it was just KJ Winston and Jalen Reed. They really held it down at safety and did really nicely. So, and I think Winston has he's got those physical skills. He's got that build, good tackler, was usually in the right spot, had one or two breakdowns last year as is expected, but he has the intangibles too, to be a team captain type. So I think that he's someone that I think is coming out a little bit from under the radar this offseason. But I think that when we get to like the summer, he'll still be a little bit unknown. But once we get to the fall, people are really going to know who he is.
Defensively, I go through the roster. I remember what these guys look like. I love the down linemen. I love the names and kind of the flash of the edge guys. And yet I'm like, shoot, is it really that easy to replace Chop Robinson? Is it that easy? Like, are they just going to be damn good again up front?
I mean, a lot of it depends on what Abdul Carter does. He's making that move from linebacker to defensive end. Early in the year, at the beginning of spring ball, James Franklin, I think, did a nice job of trying to kind of temper the expectations a little bit. That's kind of the approach I was taking too, where, Abdul is incredibly talented, really athletic, knows the game, and he's a legit student of the game, the way that he talks about it. But it's still a completely new position. Going from linebacker to defensive end, like it changes. There's different responsibilities. He also brought up that the linemen are on you right away. You don't get that running start. And so there's kind of some tempering of things, but by the time we got to April, James Franklin kind of came out and said like, yeah, this is working. Abdul Carter was like, yeah, this is working. Teammates were all like, yeah, like this is going to work. So I think Carter can have a real impact there. But they returned Zariah Fisher and Amin Vanover, two guys who were in the rotation last year. You get Jameel Lyons back, who was who burned his red shirt last year. And then you got Denai Dennis Sutton, who's probably going to start opposite Abdul Carter. And he's, 6'5", 270. Looks like he's like 6'7" at this point. Just an enormous guy off the edge, former 5-star. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise if, next year it's draft time again for the second straight year. Penn State has both of its starting edge rushers drafted, pretty early.
What positions can they best survive like in-season attrition because they're deep enough?
I think their defensive tackle group is really deep. It's really interesting because Hakeem Beeman and Devon Elise are both coming back for 6 years. And then Smith Vilbert, who has mostly been at defensive end, has only played one game in the past 2 years because of injury and other reasons. He's playing both defensive end and defensive tackle. He's another 6-year guy. So you have these 24-year-olds who are going to be in the middle of your defensive line. Zane Durant is someone who I really, really like. He could have a big year. And then you have Keziah Izzard there as well as someone who's played a lot of football. And then behind that, you've got a couple guys who are in their second and third years of the program. And Penn State had 4 defensive tackles join the program as early enrollee freshmen back in January. Obviously, on the interior, who knows how soon they'll be ready to contribute. A couple of those guys one of those guys was injured. Another was a tear down and build back up kind of project, T.A. Cunningham, who I'm sure some people are familiar with. But I think that Penn State has a lot of bodies in there. That's like pretty much the theme of the defense. As you look at all these positions, ton of bodies. It's like, how are they going to find playing time for all these guys? But you also know that they're really well secured against attrition in season.
Which fall position battle is going to be like the most impactful for this team based on who wins?
I think I would look at cornerback. I think I'm really interested to see how that shakes out. Cam Miller is going into his junior year. He's played a lot of football the past 3 years. Elliott Washington and Zion Tracy are in year 2. They got a real taste of the spotlight in the Peach Bowl. It was not pretty. Baptism by fire for those guys. And everyone thinks that they came out of the other side better for that experience. But then you add AJ Harris, transfer from Georgia, who was a 5-star last year. And then you have Jalen Kimber, who's played a ton of football at Florida and Georgia, come in. So suddenly you restock the competition after losing Kalen King, Daquan Hardy, and Johnny Dixon. The introduction of the line position changes things a little bit in terms of mixing and matching those guys, getting them onto the field. But I think that that's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out, because it's been kind of a staple of Penn State these past couple of years, is having that high level cornerback play. And if Penn State can, if these guys can come in, win jobs, and keep that level going, they could be in good shape defensively.
Where does this staff, or where do you think the quarterback can take the biggest step?
Quarterback just needs to make big plays. I think that's the big thing. Aller was never in a position last year where there were a couple of times where they needed him to win a game. Ohio State and Michigan, they needed him to do something. And he didn't. And then in the other games, they won them so comfortably that they didn't really need him to win a game for them. So I think that you need to see Aller make those big plays, hit on big throws and big moments. I guess the Indiana game last year, where he had the last minute throw to Keandre Lambert-Smith down the sideline, that was really the one time where it kind of showed up, where it was back against the wall. Like, you only have so much time left. You got to go. And they went and they delivered in that moment. So it's kind of, there weren't too many of those though. And we need to see Aller, I think, come out on top in one of those against like a high caliber, prominent opponent.
When I was running the numbers, it looks like Penn State is the team that would have made the 12-team playoff like the most number of times relative to how many times it actually made the 4-team playoff. What with this schedule? I mean, no Michigan, no Oregon, which it's a pretty good Big Ten draw. I mean, obviously you got to play Ohio State. Some tricky road ones at Wisconsin, at USC, but you could do worse than this, certainly, with respect to the Big Ten schedule, and a pretty manageable road game, I think, against the Mountaineers, although it is in Morgantown this year. What needs to happen for Penn State to actually make the 12-team playoff and not be like a joke or not the Penn State joke, like not have people tell the joke where it's like, oh, look, Franklin would have made a 12-team playoff if it existed, except now he didn't, which, I mean, I don't know. I think the guy's done pretty well there, but what needs to happen for them to make sure they make the playoff?
Yeah, I just think that they need to elevate in those big games. I mean, these past 2 years, they've been really good at taking care of business. I mean, when they go 11-2 and win the Rose Bowl in 2022, and really none of the games that they won were in doubt. Like, they really cruised that year outside of the losses to Michigan and Ohio State. Last year, it was pretty similar. They mostly cruised outside of Michigan, Ohio State. The Indiana game was dicey, and then the bowl game loss to Ole Miss, which they were dealing with a ton of opt-outs and were playing with maybe the most engaged team not in the college football playoff, in a bowl. So I just think that they need to build on that taking care of business. I mean, I think that they need to try to get through the season 11-1 to leave no doubt. Because I think if you're 10-2, you can probably have a case depending on who those two were, but you're still, once you start factoring in all the other 2 lost teams, it could get a little dicey. But I think the schedule sets up nicely. I think October is where we're going to learn kind of what this team is, who they are. You're going to have UCLA, and UCLA it's not the best team coming in, but it's going to be a new matchup. You're going to have eyeballs on you, because people have seen Penn State, Illinois like the week before. You've seen that before in a Big Ten game. You're going to have more eyeballs on you with UCLA at Beaver Stadium. And then after that, you go to USC, you have a bye week, then you go to Wisconsin. I think that 3-game stretch will kind of tell you what this team is about. And oh, by the way, right after that, you play Ohio State at Beaver Stadium. So that kind of 5 weeks there, I think that kind of determines, what this is for Penn State.
Indeed. Daniel, really enjoyed it, man. Everybody needs to check out Lions 247. I know I will, for all your preseason coverage and, of course, in-season coverage as well. And give Tyler my best as well, man.
Thanks, bud. Always enjoy it.
I see, bud.